Gentlemen, let me ask you something, and I want you to answer honestly, just between you and me. Have you ever stood in a quiet moment and wondered whether you measure up? Whether the woman in your life, or the woman you want in your life, is secretly comparing you to some number she has in her head? If you have, you are not alone. And today, I am going to give you something that most men never get: the actual science. Not opinions. Not reassurances designed to make you feel better. Real peer-reviewed data that answers this question once and for all. I'm Dr. Lila Romano, a urologist with over a decade of experience, and I have had this exact conversation with more men than I can count. Stay with me until the end, because what the research reveals is going to surprise you. And more importantly, it is going to free you. Now, before we get into the data, I want to take a moment and acknowledge something. This anxiety, it doesn't start in adulthood. For most men, it starts in adolescence, in locker rooms, in jokes that weren't really jokes, in comparisons that were never fair to begin with, in images from media and adult content that had absolutely nothing to do with reality. And here's what makes it so persistent. You carry those early impressions with you for decades. Even when life is good, even when relationships are strong, that quiet doubt can still surface. Am I enough? Does she wish things were different? For men over 50, this concern can actually intensify because aging brings real changes. Erections may take longer to develop. Morning firmness may not be as automatic as it once was. Sensitivity shifts. And when those changes happen, old insecurities have a way of rushing back in. Some men start to think, maybe I was never enough. Maybe aging has taken something important away from me. I've watched this anxiety quietly damage confidence, create distance in relationships, and in some cases, cause men to avoid intimacy altogether. And here is what breaks my heart about that, because in my clinical experience, the vast majority of these men were completely normal by every medical measure. Every single one. The enemy here is not your body, gentlemen. The enemy is misinformation. Decades of it. And today we are going to dismantle it with evidence. But here's what I want you to notice before we go further. The data I'm about to share doesn't come from surveys where women might say what sounds polite or socially acceptable. It comes from something far more revealing. Something that shows you what women actually choose when no one is watching, when there is no pressure, no partner in the room, and no reason to say anything other than exactly what they want. Stay with me, because today I am giving you what I give my own patients. 3 layers of real scientific evidence. First, we are going to look at purchase behavior data, what women actually buy and use privately, which is far more honest than any verbal survey. Second, we are going to look at direct preference research from peer-reviewed journals. And third, we are going to talk about female anatomy, because understanding how the female body actually works will reframe this entire conversation in a way that no one else is telling you. This is not comfort. This is medicine. Let's get into it. Let me start with the numbers that most men have never heard, because most sources never go to steep. Large-scale clinical studies that carefully measured men in controlled medical settings consistently showed that the average erect length falls between 5 and 5.5 inches. Circumference, meaning girth, falls between 4.5 to 5 inches around. That is the average, not the lower end, not the minimum, the average. And the vast majority of men fall within or very close to that range. Now pause on that for a second. Have you been comparing yourself to the average or to the extreme? Because that distinction matters more than almost anything else I am going to say today. Most male anxiety about size does not come from comparing to real men. It comes from comparing it to a very specific, very distorted representation, adult content, which uses selective casting, deliberate camera techniques, and in many cases, physical enhancement. That is not a documentary. That is not a sample of the population. Comparing yourself to that is like comparing your income to a lottery winner and concluding you're poor. Most men who believe they fall short are squarely within normal range. That is not my opinion. That is clinical data. Now here's where it gets truly interesting. Researchers decided they didn't want to rely on what women say they prefer in surveys because verbal responses are influenced by social expectations, relationship context, and what sounds acceptable. They wanted to know what women actually choose when the decision is entirely private. So they looked at purchase behavior. Specifically, they analyzed best-selling insertable sex toys across 8 major adult retailers, because what a woman buys for herself alone, with no one watching, is about as honest a data point as science can produce. And here is what they found. Across all 8 distributors, the most commonly purchased insertable lengths ranged between 4 and 6 inches. Let me say that again. 4 to 6 inches. On 6 of those 8 websites, the average length of the best-selling products was under 6 inches. The average girth of the best sellers, under 4.5 inches, which, if you've been paying attention, is almost exactly the average size of a natural erect male anatomy. A separate study looked specifically at realistic products from the top 5 adult retailers in the United States, including Amazon. The average insertable length of the best sellers in that study came out to approximately 16.7 centimeters, about 6.5 inches. Slightly above average, but nowhere near extreme. And here's the nuance that study revealed. Some women may be curious about exploring modestly above average. But the key word is modestly, not dramatically, not extremely. But here's the finding that most people miss entirely, and this is the one I want you to really absorb. When researchers analyzed what actually drove purchase decisions, what made one product more popular than another, they found that price and circumference had a significantly greater impact on what women chose than insertable length did. In other words, women cared more about affordability and comfortable fit than they did about maximizing size. Products with larger than average girth were consistently less popular than average-sized ones. Read that again, gentlemen. When women had complete freedom to choose any size, any shape, any measurement they wanted, with zero social pressure, zero judgment, and zero audience, they chose average. Every single time. Now let's talk about what women say when asked directly in clinical research settings. Studies published in the Journal of Sexual Medicine on female size preferences consistently show that the majority of women cluster their preferences around average measurements. There is one nuance worth acknowledging. Women who tend to experience vaginal orgasms showed a slight preference for modest increases in length. Slight. Modest. We are not talking about extremes. We are talking about small, incremental differences. And that nuance exists within a broader finding that still centers around average. Yes, outliers exist. There will always be individual preferences at both ends of any spectrum. But outliers do not define human experience any more than the tallest person in the room defines average height. When you look at the full data set, the picture is clear. Now here's where I need to stop and teach you something about biology, because this is the part that changes the entire conversation. The female anatomy is not designed the way most men imagine it. The majority of nerve endings responsible for sexual pleasure are concentrated in the outer portion, the first 3 to 4 centimeters of the vaginal canal. Not deep inside, not at the far end, right near the surface. Think of it like this. Imagine a piano where the most sensitive, most responsive keys are all in the front. You don't need to reach the back of the instrument to play beautiful music. You need to know which keys to press and how to press them. Extreme depth is not biologically necessary for pleasure. What matters far more is arousal, responsiveness, rhythm, and relaxation. As a woman becomes aroused, blood flow increases, tissue becomes more sensitive, and the entire system becomes more receptive. Emotional comfort plays a massive role in that process. When a woman feels safe, respected, and connected, her body responds in ways that have nothing to do with measurement. And here is something that is almost never discussed, because it makes the bigger is always better myth not just wrong, but actually backwards. As women age, hormonal changes, particularly the decline in estrogen, affect tissue elasticity and natural lubrication. For many women over 50, excessive size is not a source of pleasure. It is a source of discomfort, sometimes pain. Comfort matters enormously. Pleasure cannot exist alongside pain. When men assume that larger must be better, they are projecting a male-centered assumption onto a female experience that the biology simply does not support. The data is in. The anatomy confirms it. And now I want to talk about the real issue, the one that's actually affecting your intimacy right now. Here's a truth that I don't think gets enough attention in these conversations. Size anxiety doesn't just cause emotional distress. It causes a very specific, very measurable physical response in your body. And that physical response is one of the primary drivers of erection difficulties in men over 50. Here's the mechanism. When you are anxious about anything, but especially during intimacy, your body releases cortisol and adrenaline. These are your stress hormones. And their job, in the presence of a perceived threat, is to constrict your blood vessels, redirect blood flow away from non-essential systems, and put your body on high alert. Here's the problem. An erection is a blood flow event. It requires your blood vessels to relax and open, allowing blood to rush into the erectile chambers and stay there. Stress hormones do the exact opposite. They tighten your vessels. They reduce blood flow. They tell your body this is not the time. So when a man carries anxiety about size into an intimate moment, he is literally releasing the chemicals that prevent erections. The worry is creating the very problem he is afraid of, not his anatomy, his anxiety. And this becomes a cycle that feeds itself. The belief, I must perform a certain way, I must meet a certain standard, creates pressure. That pressure triggers stress hormones. Those hormones interfere with blood flow. The erection doesn't respond the way the man hoped. And now the belief feels confirmed. So next time, the anxiety is even stronger, and the cycle tightens. I have seen this pattern in my practice more times than I can count. And I want you to understand something clearly. This is not a physical failure. This is a neurological and hormonal response to a false belief. And false beliefs can be corrected. Now let me ask you something personal. And I want you to sit with this question honestly. During intimacy, are you actually present with your partner? Or are you somewhere else, monitoring yourself, comparing, evaluating, waiting for something to go wrong? Because that inner dialogue matters more than almost any physical variable. Your partner doesn't experience your thoughts, but she experiences your presence, or the absence of it. Now let's talk about what women actually report when researchers ask them about sexual satisfaction. Not about size, about satisfaction. Study after study, published in journals including the Journal of Sexual Medicine and the Archives of Sexual Behavior, finds the same things at the top of the list: emotional connection, attentiveness, communication, technique, rhythm, variation, responsiveness to feedback, both verbal and nonverbal. Size does not appear at the top. It often does not appear in the top 5. In over a decade of urology, I have never had a woman tell me she ended a relationship because of average size. But I have had countless men tell me that anxiety, their own silent, internal anxiety, destroyed theirs. That is not a small distinction. That is the whole story. And for men over 50 specifically, this becomes even more relevant. Aging brings real physiological changes. Erections may take longer to develop. The automatic morning response may not be as reliable. Recovery time between encounters increases. These are not signs of failure. These are signs of a body that is adapting to time, which every human body does. The men who understand that and work with it thrive. The men who interpret every change as confirmation of inadequacy struggle. Here's what the research on long-term relationships shows. Women in committed, long-term partnerships, especially as they age, increasingly value consistency, presence, and emotional safety above physical novelty. Satisfaction in these couples often deepens over time. Not because the bodies get younger, because the communication gets better, the pressure decreases, and intimacy becomes something shared rather than something performed. That shift, gentlemen, that can be one of the most liberating things that happens in a man's intimate life, if he allows it to be. So if size is not the variable that determines satisfaction, what is? And more importantly, what can you actually do, starting this week, to improve your intimate life in ways that are measurable, meaningful, and completely within your control? I have 5 steps for you, and I want you to take these seriously because these are the same recommendations I give my patients in the clinic. The first one is cardiovascular health, and I cannot stress this enough. Erections are vascular events. They're entirely dependent on the health of your blood vessels, their flexibility, their ability to relax and open on demand, and the volume of blood they can deliver. Cardiovascular health is the single most important physical variable in male sexual function, not size. Blood flow. A 2023 meta-analysis published in the Journal of Sexual Medicine analyzed 11 randomized controlled trials involving over 1,000 men. The finding was remarkable. Men who performed aerobic exercise, brisk walking, jogging, cycling, swimming for approximately 40 minutes, 4 times per week, showed improvements in erectile function comparable to prescription medication. 160 minutes per week. That is the number. And for many men, simply becoming more physically active produced noticeable improvements without any other intervention. Your blood vessels are where your confidence lives, gentlemen. Train them. The second step is sleep optimization. And this one is underestimated constantly. Poor sleep does two damaging things simultaneously. It raises cortisol, the same stress hormone that constricts blood vessels and disrupts erections. And it suppresses testosterone production, which the body performs primarily during deep sleep cycles. When you consistently sleep poorly, you're starting every day with elevated stress hormones and lower testosterone. That combination directly undermines your energy, your mood, your desire, and your physical response. The protocol is simple but non-negotiable. 7 to 8 hours per night. A consistent sleep and wake schedule, even on weekends. No screens for at least 1 hour before bed because blue light suppresses melatonin and delays the transition into deep sleep. This is not optional maintenance. This is foundational to everything else working properly. The third step is communication. And I know this one makes some men uncomfortable, but stay with me. Most couples, even couples who have been together for decades, have never had an explicit, honest conversation about what feels good. They assume, they infer, they interpret silence as satisfaction. And those assumptions create quiet distance that neither partner fully understands. Here is your assignment for this week. 1 conversation. Low pressure, no agenda, no defensiveness. Simply ask your partner what she enjoys most. Not about size, about sensation, about pace, about what makes her feel most connected. That question alone, asked with genuine curiosity and openness, communicates more confidence than any physical measurement ever could. The men who ask are the men who learn. And the men who learn are the ones whose partners are genuinely satisfied. The fourth step is breaking the comparison habit. And this one is critical. Adult content is not a documentary. It is not a representative sample of human anatomy. It uses selective casting, choosing performers who represent the extreme end of physical variation, not the average. It uses camera angles and techniques specifically designed to exaggerate dimensions. And in many cases, it involves physical enhancement methods that are not disclosed. Comparing your real body to those images is not just unfair, it is scientifically meaningless. It is like looking at a professional bodybuilder and concluding you are unhealthy because you don't look the same. Here is what the research shows. Men who reduce or eliminate consumption of adult content report measurable decreases in performance anxiety and measurable improvements in real-world intimate function. The protocol is a 30-day break. 30 days. Replace that time with genuine physical presence, with your partner if you have one, with physical activity and social connection if you don't. Give your brain 30 days without distorted reference points. The shift in self-perception is often significant. The fifth and final step is technique. And this is the one that is entirely within your control, entirely improvable, and according to every satisfaction study I have reviewed, the one that matters most. Rhythm, variation, attentiveness, responsiveness, the ability to slow down, to read your partner's responses, to adjust pace and pressure and approach based on what you observe. These are skills. They are learnable. They improve with practice and with communication. Unlike anatomy, they are not fixed. Unlike measurements, they are not static. A man who is present, attentive, and responsive will consistently outperform a man who is larger but distracted, anxious, or inattentive. That is not my opinion. That is what women report. Every study, every time. This is the variable entirely within your control, gentlemen. Focus here. This is where the real work happens. Now I need to give you some important warnings, because no responsible medical conversation about this topic is complete without them. First, if your anxiety about size is persistent, intrusive, and affecting your daily life, your confidence at work, your willingness to pursue relationships, your ability to be present even outside the bedroom, I want you to know that this may indicate a clinical condition called penile dysmorphic disorder. It is a recognized form of body dysmorphic disorder, and it is real, it is treatable, and it is nothing to be ashamed of. If this resonates with you, please speak with a mental health professional or a urologist who specializes in sexual health. You deserve support, not just information. Second, if you notice sudden or significant changes in erection quality, not gradual age-related shifts, but sudden changes, please see a doctor. In the majority of cases, this reflects a vascular or hormonal issue. Conditions like diabetes, hypertension, and elevated cholesterol affect erection quality far more directly than anatomy ever could. These conditions are manageable, but they need to be identified and addressed. Do not attribute a medical symptom to a size concern and leave it untreated. Third, and I am begging you on this one, do not spend a single dollar on products that promise to permanently increase size. Pills, pumps, devices, topical creams, stretching programs. I have reviewed the literature extensively. There is no peer-reviewed evidence supporting permanent size increase through any of these methods. None. And many of them, particularly aggressive vacuum devices and unregulated supplements, cause real, documented injuries, including scar tissue formation that can permanently reduce erectile function. I am asking you directly as your doctor, do not go down that road. And fourth, if your partner has gone through menopause, please understand what that means for her physically. Declining estrogen levels affect tissue elasticity, natural lubrication, and the time needed for full arousal. What felt comfortable before may require more patience and preparation now. Attentiveness here is not optional, it is essential, and it is deeply appreciated. So, gentlemen, here is my challenge for you. Pick one of the 5 steps I gave you today, just one, and commit to it for the next 30 days. Whether it is the cardiovascular protocol or the sleep improvement. Pick one. Start today. Give your body and your mind 30 days of honest, consistent support. If this video gave you something valuable today, a piece of information that shifted something for you, please share it. There is another man in your life, I promise you, carrying this same quiet anxiety. He deserves this information too. And if you haven't subscribed yet, do it now. Because every day I bring you real, doctor-approved guidance on men's health after 50, the kind of honest, evidence-based conversation that most doctors don't have time for in a 15-minute appointment. This is Dr. Lila Romano, and I will see you in the next video.